Hi, so I made a video about twin flames, quite a long one, looking at how you can come through some of the more difficult aspects of it. But in this one, I just wanted to add a bit of a caveat about talking about when you might want to step away from the whole thing altogether. So there are many videos out there talking about twin flames, talking about how maybe you can come into union and focusing on those sort of areas. And I feel like, to me, people could get a bit carried away. And the idea of focusing on union seems to me to not be the point of the thing. Now, I'm no expert on anything here, I'm just someone who's looked into this a bit. But it strikes me that there are moments within the journey where the yearning is so great, it can feel like too much love for one person to hold. It's a lot. You do come through that. If you come back to yourself, come back to creativity, come back to your life path, what it is that you're doing here, then you're going to come through that. If you've got spiritual practice such as meditation, spiritual connection, that's going to help as well. And at any point throughout the journey as well, you can get some spiritual help regards spiritual healing such as Reiki, shamanic healing, light language healing, and so on. Of course, there's no guarantees. Do your due diligence before you embark on any form of spiritual healing, because of course it's all unregulated. So just, try and find healers that sort of resonate with you. But when the focus is so much on union, etc., I feel like that isn't going to be the case for everyone. I don't think union in this relationship, in a relationship with this other person, is necessarily the point. I feel like the marriage between the masculine and the feminine within is part of the journey. Anything that it flags up for you that may need healing is part of the journey. Transforming all of that yearning, all of that wanting something external to you, transforming all of that into empowering yourself is probably part of the journey. Coming back to you is so important. And as such, I'm not entirely sure that some of these videos are necessarily going to be good for everyone. Also, you throw into the equation that sometimes you're questioning, is this a twin flame journey at all? Is this just a one-sided yearning situation? Is this a false twin flame? Is this karmic in nature? And many twin flame unions apparently can be karmic as well, and that might make sense if you've had many lifetimes together. But so on. So you can be trying to tease apart and work out what this is to you. And I feel like the most important thing, probably throughout this whole journey, as well as coming back to yourself, is grounding. Ground yourself back into reality, especially if you believe you're having any spiritual experiences, because they can be very heady, very otherworldly, wildly impractical, and you could get a bit lost in the enticement, in the allure of these sort of experiences, if you think you're feeling their energy, if you're having dreams about this person and so on. It's almost like a dark enchantment at times. It's almost like a dark fairy tale. You could get lost in the yearning, lost in the wanting, lost in the belief that maybe somehow you and they could get together in a concrete way. But if there's any type of connection where there's fantastic amounts of yearning and ungrounded stuff going on, you have a real duty of care to yourself to come back to what is real, come back to reality, come back to your life. Make sure your inner masculine is holding on to your life, that you're not just sitting, waiting around, you know? One of the aspects as well, I think, that could be dangerous potentially, is if you feel that you've spent lifetimes together, if you feel that union is somehow destined to happen, you could end up yearning for a while. You could end up waiting for this person, putting your life on hold. Personally, I think that's a terrible idea. Life is for living. You must live your life. You know, if you're considering doing anything, if you were considering doing anything before you were suddenly hit by a grand, giant tidal wave of feeling, you must find your feet again, come back to earth and carry on as you were, you know. So if you were feeling about, say, moving abroad, taking a new position, which might take you further away from this person and so on, you have to do what's right for you. That's the fundamental bottom line here. It strikes me that these great yearning style relationships, or I should say connections, offer more of a teaching capacity than anything else, you know. And you have to be able to ruthlessly look at what's real in the 3D. And by ruthless, I don't mean being cruel to this other person, but I mean you have to cut away what isn't working. You cannot sit around in yearning forever, because you're going to end up potentially completely disappointed if nothing has happened with regard to the connection. So you must live your own life. So to my mind then, I feel like that's the most important thing. And the greater the sort of enchantment element, so the greater the yearning, the more fantastical the feelings, the wilder the pull, the magnetic attraction, the more you need to come back to what is real. You know, they might seem very nice feelings for a time. They might offer comfort. They might offer fantasy to escape to in your mind. But you must come back to reality. You know, it is almost like a dark fairy tale. I feel like at times it can seem like an initiation, you know, and can you also stay true to your morals and your ethics, especially if you or they or both are already in connections and so on. So it's really a case of just bottom lining it ruthlessly, grounding it into reality, because oftentimes you can find that these feelings, these wild yearnings, have no foothold in reality. That is to say, they might be quite a nice person, but you might find you have nothing in common with them, and so on. Feelings alone don't create the foundations for a relationship. They're the initial spark, the initial attracting point, which draws you to another. And even if the feelings feel like a bonfire, that is all they are. This initial thing, this ignition point. But what's going to keep the fire burning? You know, the feelings might smoulder away for a while all by themselves. And this is part of the problem, isn't it? People get together with people they're wildly attracted to. And then a year, 2 years down the line, they can realise there's nothing left. It's empty because it was all based upon attraction and fantasy. But there was nothing real to ground the relationship. And so I feel like people can get a bit lost in the terminology of the thing, in the wildness of the thing, in the razzle-dazzle excitement of the thing, but you've got to come back to what's real, you know? And very often, twin flames are here to teach us something. you know, not necessarily on a conscious level, and some of it's possibly happening in the spiritual realm as well. But it isn't necessarily that you and they are going to get together. So gently coming to terms with that is really solid advice, I feel. And can we just take a moment to praise soulmate relationships? Because with all of this sort of excitement about twin flame stuff that's all over the internet, you know, people are forgetting the solidity and the beauty of a soulmate relationship. A soulmate relationship is the sort of relationship that will last. A twin flame is the wild, mad catalyst that dances in and dances out of your life, you know. And in some cases, yes, potentially some people might come together with their twin flames, but I do not believe that's necessarily going to be the case, and I definitely don't think that you should be waiting for it. Soulmates, though, soulmates are a different story. Soulmates are the person that you click with in the 3D realm. You may have the odd telepathic connections with soulmates too, you know. Soulmates might not bring the razzle-dazzle or the excitement or the gloss or the glamour or the glitz of a twin flame union, but they bring something much better, much deeper. They bring the value that you need to go the course, to last the distance, you know. And if you're getting a bit lost and you're feeling really sad and you're missing this person that you believe is your twin flame or false twin flame or whatever they are, just ask yourself the questions. What do you have in the 3D that you could really make it work truly? And I think sometimes when you look at that and you really look at that honestly, take the feelings out of the equation and look at it honestly from a logical, rational perspective. That's where your inner masculine is going to help as well, you know. And then I think the answers are probably, in some cases, well, it's just not going to work, you know. Whereas a soulmate connection, they're going to be your best friend. And that's what you want in a long-term relationship. You know, what qualities make long-term relationships stick? You get each other, you vibe on the same wavelength. Maybe you haven't spent 100 lifetimes with this person, but it doesn't matter if you click and you get each other in this one, you know? And just because you've spent 100 lifetimes with somebody doesn't necessarily mean you're going to click at all on the 3D in this life. So qualities then that make things last are qualities like friendship, openness, honesty, and a willingness to be vulnerable, you and they, and to know and to trust that the other person will meet that vulnerability with great care, a deep, abiding respect and friendship, you know, warmth, laughter. I often think that you don't necessarily need to have everything in common with your soulmate, but you do need to have shared values, you know. You might have quite different hobbies, that's absolutely fine, but you need to have shared values and some shared things in common, some shared things which you can both enjoy together. And shared values include your morals, your ethics, where you stand on particular things, you know. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to vibe with them in every single regard politically. But if you hold the same values of morals and ethics, it probably doesn't matter because you both kind of will end up wanting the same sort of thing anyway. Where are you in life? Where are they in life? You know, it helps if you both want the same sort of things, you're both working towards the same goals. You know, if you want kids, but they can't stand being around kids, that doesn't bode well if you're young and you want to build a life. You have to think in terms of practicality as well, you know. Do your goals align? Do your values align? And very often with a soulmate, the answer is yes. There's no work you have to do in that regard. You just click together. And the only work then that you have to do is just to maintain the relationship, you know, to be caring and loving and open and considerate and interested in your partner and all of those sort of things. A twin flame, on the other hand, is a whole different kettle of fish. A twin flame will potentially just set you on fire in terms of the intensity of it, the attraction, the wildness of it. And that can feel very alluring, very insane, very discombobulating as you're trying to work out, is there any sort of correlating factor in the 3D world with which I might be able to assign some of this wildness of feeling? And chances are the answer is a resounding no. But that doesn't necessarily bode well, you know, for any kind of lasting union. And it might be that the divine is doing some work behind the scenes, and it might be that one day, you know, unicorns will bound into the scene and the stars will align, and somehow you'll meet each other somewhere in the middle where each other are at and just click and get each other, and it will be beautiful and all the rest of it. But if the odds are wildly stacked against that, you have to come back to reality and don't sit around and wait. Equally, it could also reasonably be said that if you have a lot of trust in the universe, that you could just carry on with your life very, very happily, knowing that trust in the universe will mean that if this is meant to be, there will be other opportunities in the future at some stage whereby you and they will collide into each other's lives again, and possibly more aligned later at that point. But you must live your life now. I also feel with some of these videos, there could be a sense of people maybe feeling like they're doing something wrong. You know, like if you're not with your twin flame in the 3D, and there's step-by-step guides out there, which there are in some cases, you know, then it could be easy perhaps to fall into the thinking of going, oh my God, well, I'm doing something wrong because we're not together in the 3D. Don't be thinking like that, you know. That sort of goes into the idea that somehow you're responsible for your potential twin flame and they're you know, you're not. You are responsible to yourself. You're responsible to live the best life you can for yourself. You're not responsible for them. You know, it isn't a case of, well, if I do this, then they'll come in. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you can't focus on that. You know, you can't go beating yourself up or feeling like there are people who have magically pulled in their twin flames and that these are sort of somehow celestial beings and they're better than you, and you are somehow failing at life if you haven't done this or anything like that. You mustn't go down that route either. If these people think they're with their twin flames, that's lovely, that's their path. That isn't necessarily yours. What's your path? What's your song that you are here to sing? Who are you in the world? What are you here to do? Do you know? Are you happy? You know? Sometimes these things can come in to test us, test our resilience, test where we are potentially, you know, potentially. Test our ability to get through, find our way back to ourselves. And at no point is anybody better or worse than anybody else. You know, if they've managed to come into the union with their twin flame, that's great, that's lovely, it's a wonderful thing. Is that necessarily a universal experience? No. Is that necessarily a sort of cookie cutter course that you can follow and then magically get into a union with your twin flame? No. What are you here to do? Who are you in the world? The most important thing that anyone can do if they find themselves in such a place, and it's almost like an affliction, it isn't necessarily a beautiful thing to be in a place of wild yearning, in a place of limerence style feeling, you know? So the most important thing to do is to come back to yourself, ground yourself in reality, meditate, find that spiritual way through as well. Find your path in this life if you haven't. Come back to creativity. Creativity is a great way to really get in touch with who you are. It doesn't matter in what sense it is, you know, what do you do that's creative? Maybe you write, sew, paint, sing. You know, I think everybody's got something. What hobbies do you like to do? When was the last time you went out in nature? Maybe swam in the sea or took a walk in a forest, you know. Find the things that make your heart and soul sing and then do those. And that's important advice anyway, especially in these times that seem so dark. You know? Ruthlessly take care of your own needs. Take care of your boundaries. Boundaries can get radically lowered when people come into contact with such beings that they think are a twin flame. Because you give this person an extra bit of leeway because your feelings for them are so great. But no, you know, boundaries are one of the most important things as well. Boundaries help keep you safe. They help keep you well. And one of the things about such a big, powerful connection is mental and emotional health. It can be very draining to feel such a level of love that you don't feel like you're equipped to hold. And so you have to come back to yourself. You cannot keep pouring into a connection if it's one-sided or if it doesn't look like it has any potential on the 3D or if it isn't benefiting you in any way. Pull your energy back to yourself. Focus back on your life again. And it goes without saying as well that if this person represents a real problem character in any way, shape or form, then be very, very, very wary there as well, you know? Because again, the idea of twin flame and all of the allure can mean that sometimes we're not looking at things as they are. We're looking at things through these rose-tinted lenses, through a wild distortion of reality, in the case of great intensity of feeling. So you must come back down to earth radically in such a case, you know? If you feel like this person is avoidant as well, and there are quite a few videos to suggest that in some cases, part of the runner-chaser dynamic allegedly might mean that the person that would identify as a divine masculine is the runner. Is the runner. Potentially because they're avoidant. And if that's the case, that's a wild red flag. Okay, it doesn't matter if you think they're your divine partner. It doesn't matter, as I say, if you think you've spent several lifetimes together. It doesn't matter if you're having dreams, intuitions, all sorts of feelings. It doesn't matter if your heart is wildly into this idea that this is your person. If they're a bit avoidant, etc., that's a huge red flag, you know, because avoidance get triggered by the very closeness that they desire. And it doesn't happen right away. They have this honeymoon period. There's a bit of love bombing. And then after a time, when you're bonding with them, you know, via dopamine and oxytocin and all the other good things, allegedly, so I heard in one video, and I don't know if this is true, but allegedly they don't have the same sort of oxytocin bonding thing going on. That hormone just doesn't seem to be present, allegedly. Whether it is or whether it isn't, they don't bond with you in the same way that you're bonding with them. And so if you think your divine counterpart is an avoidant, they're not going to be long-term relationship material, because they're too broken and too lost and too boundaried and too, they're not so much boundaries, we're talking a fortress, and when those feelings kick in for them, when those feelings of anxiety and discomfort around closeness kick in for that person, they're going to be distancing themselves from you. And one of the most painful things in the world can be the discard, either from, say, a narcissist or from an avoidant. So unless they're willing to change, and unless, not even willing to change, unless they're actively changing, it isn't going to be good enough. For example, if you are looking to try to, come together with your perceived twin flame, and they're an avoidant and they know it, and they come towards you and they say something like, I'm an avoidant, but I'm going to seek therapy. Well, that's very nice. That means that maybe within a year, maybe within a couple of years, maybe 5 years, who knows the timescale, maybe with continued effort, they might be ready for a relationship. But if they're still in the process of, I'm going to seek therapy, etc., then it's perfectly plausible that the initial months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years of your relationship with this person could be absolutely very, very painful indeed, emotionally painful. So really proceed with caution, You want to know that they're getting therapy. You want to know that they've been to a few sessions already. At the very least, proceed with extreme caution. And these are people who, allegedly, by all accounts, didn't receive love as children. So there's a lot of childhood wounding there that they may not even be aware of, because their other needs would have been met. But they're not able to easily show love, and they can just be a world of difficulty, to be on the receiving end of. So have a think about what you want. Do they match you? Are you a good match for each other? Are you going to enrich each other's lives? Or is this person just going to burn it all down? Is this person going to see you spiraling into anxiety, etc.? This is your wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver called it. You have to be very, very careful about who you share it with. Wild feelings are not reality. Wild feelings are fantasy. And the fantasy is lovely, but it's also dark and dangerous in that sort of fairy tale-esque sense as well. And so you're going to need a sense-making exercise, a ruthless one. You're going to need a pen and paper, and you're going to need to write down pros and cons in the most logical way possible. That's your inner masculine doing the sensible work to hold your inner feminine. That's what you're going to need to do. And I touch briefly upon narcissists. I mean, if you think that there's a chance that this person is a narcissist, or any one of the sort of dark triad of narcissists, sociopaths or psychopaths, it goes without saying they're not relationship material either. Unfortunately, sadly, again, it starts in childhood with the narcissist, at least. I don't know about the other two, but all I know is with those three, it looks like there's usually no chance of them changing. They carry high levels of manipulation, but it's an absolute nightmare to be on the receiving end of them. You don't want to go there, An avoidant, they might be able to change, They have emotional empathy. They're just not able to show it in some cases. They might try and control a relationship. They might be a bit hot and cold, etc. Any manipulative tactics on their behalf will probably be born from crippling fear, or certainly some levels of fear, you know. Whereas a narcissist, etc., any manipulations on their part would probably just be deliberate. You know, they have low to no emotional empathy. So yeah, so I just wanted to touch upon those things, you know. The label twin flame is a very dangerous label if misapplied, or if you put too much store in it, if you put too much faith on that label. Don't. Treat it like anything else in your life. Use it as a learning tool. What can you learn? How can you move from all of that darkness back to the light again? Because that's kind of what we're doing on this planet anyway, right? We exist in both dark and light, but we always, always, always must find our way back to the light, back to that which is good and beautiful and true, because love is far, far greater a power than fear, than darkness ever could be. Love is the greatest power of all. And so we have a great duty of care to ourselves, to come back to that love, to strengthen ourselves, you know, to honour that which we are, to know that we are worthy. Because again, this journey, if you're on it, even a false twin flame journey, can still trigger some childhood wounds, can still trigger feelings around self-worth and so on. You must come back to yourself, strengthen your sense of self. We all seek a little bit of outside validation at times. That's normal. But you must come back to knowing that you are worthy, that you are good enough, that you are no less worthy than anyone else on this planet, that you are loved beyond measure by those in spirit, and hopefully many people on this planet too. That you have a purpose, that you are here for a reason. Hold your head up high. Don't let anything knock you over. And if you do get knocked over at times, because you're human and we're all human, get back up. Come back very lovingly to cherishing yourself, you know, knowing your worth. And I'm not talking about going into grandiosity or narcissism here. I'm just talking about treating yourself as though, with the same regard, treating yourself with the same regard as you would treat a dearly cherished friend. You wouldn't see them wrong. You wouldn't let them go chasing after somebody that wasn't right for them. So make sure you hold yourself in high regard. These are very strong feelings, very powerful feelings, which can be quite dangerous to the human psyche in some ways. So cherishing yourself, coming back to you, very, very important, and keeping self-respect as well. Very important, you know. Don't go chasing anyone that's unworthy either. Know your worth. Keep to your morals, keep to your ethics. Don't engage in behaviour that you will feel regret for at a later date. Hold your head up. You are worthy, you know. And I feel like the twin flame relationship is, or twin flame type of feelings, the initial yearning and such, I think it's a really great reminder in coming back to reality. It's a really great reminder in being able to tease apart what's real and what is fantasy and what's imagined. As such, it could be a teacher, especially if you've been in any form of patterning of behaviour in your life, where you've been a bit enchanted by fantasy and fallen for the wrong people at times. The twin flame is like a massive culmination of that sort of thing, because it's so wild and so intense. So I think it's really important. Ruthlessly strip away the feelings, write down a pros and cons list. If you say that you love them, have a little think about what you mean. Do you mean that you love the idea of them? Do you mean that you love the idea of them that's being sort of superimposed onto your consciousness? Do you love an idea of them, of their soul? Do you love an idea of their heart, of who you think they are underneath everything? Because if the answer is yes, red flag, huge red flag, okay? Because who they are, who they present to you in this world, is who you would be with, right? This imagined person. And this can happen a lot with like avoidance or other such people as well sometimes when you're dealing with them, is that you can fall in love with their potential. You can fall in love with this idealized sense of who they might be, fall in love with their heart underneath the persona. But you have to understand the persona, the carefully constructed sense of self, isn't going to fall over. It isn't going to crumble overnight and they're going to transform into this person that you want them to be. Not going to happen. You're in love with an ideal. If only they could be like this. If only they could drop this fortress. If only they could be less guarded. If only they could be less selfish. If only. All of that just means you're in love with the potential of who they are. It's lovely that you've seen that potential. Everyone has potential to be something else. You know, in the main. But it's how people present that's important if you're to have any type of connection in this 3D world with this person. How are they presenting? How are they now? Not in the future, not in some imagined future when, you know, angels have come down and shown them who they might be or God knows what else. How are they now? If the answer is they're selfish or they're guarded or they're hiding or they're just absolutely in a logical world, completely airtight, logical world, well then that's great. That's their life. That has nothing to do with you, no bearing upon yours, and they're not going to add value to yours, nor you theirs. And so you must carry on your way. This is not your person. These feelings might be echoes of another life. They might be echoes of something ethereal, or they could be projections of your own mind. It doesn't really matter where they originate. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what is real and what is concrete. And if they are not who you would like to have a relationship with, then you must let them carry on their way. And if you have to block, walk away from, do whatever you need to do to come back to yourself, then do that. And you have to be ruthless about it in terms of self-preservation, self-care, self-worth. Patrol your own boundaries like a mother tigress might fight for her cubs. Because you're worth it. Because you know you're worth it. You know? Don't do yourself down. Don't engage in behaviours that you know you're going to regret to try to win something over, because that's no way to start any relationship, is it? If you have to lower who you are, radically alter your behaviour, you know, there's videos out there talking about avoidance again. There's videos out there telling people how they might get together with avoidance. Terrible advice. I think they're awful, because one of the things they will say to people is, look, especially if you're a bit of an anxious attacher, because that can be a bit of a thing. Avoidance and anxious folk can sometimes find themselves together. The advice tends to be more avoidant, to attract in your avoidance. So drop who you are. Drop your natural warmth and care and perhaps inclination to reach out. Ignore them. Walk away. You know, and then maybe you'll attract them into your life. And I'm like, great, what happens then? What happens then? That isn't the end of the story. Them coming towards you is the beginning of a story. And as I say, if they're not willing to work on that avoidant behaviour, your natural inclination to be warm, to reach out, to bond with them is going to resurface And at some point they're going to get triggered and they're going to pull away again. But now you're going to be brokenhearted and devastated because you have bonded with this person. Horrible advice. Just be yourself. Radical, wildly authentic. But don't chase, don't demean yourself. Don't lower your self-respect for anyone. It doesn't matter how much you love them. The person that is right for you will not go by you. They will see your self-worth. Chances are that'll be a soulmate. And they'll be right by your side, championing your cause, being your best friend, having a bloody good laugh with you. You know? Take a look at your friends as well. Like, you know, sometimes if you're on Facebook or whatever, and who pops up in your feed, like, in terms of relationships, people in relationships, when they're celebrating many years anniversary, look at the way these things are worded. They're worded in the most friendly, frank, funny terms in some cases, because these are two people that just click, they get each other. If you're going to share a life with someone in a long-term way, it isn't razzle-dazzle or glitz or glamour, it's the humour, it's the vulnerability of simply being human with all the foibles and faults and flaws and embarrassing moments and funny moments and silly moments and all of it, you know, and getting this other person. You're not going to be for everyone, nor are they, but you're right for each other, and that's beautiful. And that isn't something you need a masterclass on. That isn't something you need a video to instruct you about. That's something you will know within your heart, you know? So be very careful with whom you give your heart. Be very wary of watching any of these videos about twin flames and all the rest of it. Come back to what is real for you. You hold on to your heart carefully and guard it carefully, and that will be then mirrored in the outside world. As within, so without. That hermetic principle always stands as far as I'm concerned. If you treat yourself with care and respect, other people will mirror that care and respect as well. And if they don't, you'll have no truck with that. And you'll just walk away. So it starts with you. It starts with you. Value and honour yourself. Have no truck for anybody in your life who doesn't value you as well. And know that you're a decent, lovely, worthy human, you know? So that would be my advice there. Know when to walk away and know when to run. Know when to block and know when to just, you know, cut loose. Cut them loose. You can do it with all the love in the world. You know, there's a few videos too, some of the comments on some of these videos where people are almost quite angry at their twin flames or just annoyed with them, at their perceived twin flames, you know, for not doing what they want them to do, for not coming forward and all the rest of it. What they do is none of your business. They are living a separate life to you. You have decided that maybe they're your twin. They might not feel that. Just because you're feeling a certain way doesn't absolutely mean it's a universal experience. It doesn't mean it's an experience shared by this other person. This is your perception, and that's where there can be a danger of distortion within these connections as well. You know, what they choose to do is none of your business, and vice versa. If they think that this is a shared thing, and if you start talking in a way that aligns and you feel that you could maybe start to date or get to know each other or what have you, then it's a slightly different story. If you're both healthy and in that way, emotionally, mentally capable of stepping into a connection and so on, then it's a different story. Otherwise, what they do, who they are in the world, that's on them, that's their choice. All you can do is wish them great love and carry on with your life. You know, don't allow yourself to get too carried away. don't get too carried away by the fairies. It's very easy to do. There's a lot of videos out there that can support your wildest dreams and fantasies, your most insane longings. But none of that is real. Come back to what is real. Go out with your mates, have a bloody good laugh. Draw up your pros and cons list. Talk to them. Talk to other people. Get help if you need to get help if you're in a real bad way regards this connection. You know, it can be very deep, very dark, very difficult going at times. If you need counselling, if you need healings, you know, go and do all of that, absolutely, and talk to other people too, if you feel that that's going to help and so on. But coming back to what is real, that's golden. That's what's going to get you through in life, you know. And I think as a note on that as well, just to add, and this sort of applies to any relationship. I mean, most of this advice applies across the board anyway, I believe. A lot of people think that you should follow your heart in love. They go, follow your heart. Do what your heart wants. I think it's dreadful advice. Horrible advice. Horrible advice. If your heart isn't aligned with your head, your intuition, your gut feelings, all of it. Horrible advice. And I feel like false twin flame, maybe even twin flame, etc. This can be exemplified as horrendous advice. Primarily because you've got the wildness of feeling, but no logical space for it, no reason for it in the 3D world. Horrible advice. Your heart may want to gallop ahead with this person. But as I say, if you are not friends in real life, if you can barely string a sentence together with them, if you have nothing in common, no shared values, goals, anything at all, it's going to last 3 months at best. Maybe it will carry on for a year max, you know, and it's going to burn itself out, because when all the intensity, the passion and all of that fades, as it will, what have you got left with this person, you know? So no, I feel like the best thing that you can do is come back to the logic, the rational stuff, reason. You know, the headier the feelings, the wilder, the more intense the feelings, the more you need to get your brain involved. Come back to your gut feelings, come back to your intuition as well. So, you know, feel into it as well. If you think about a future with this person, how does it make you feel? If your gut feels kind of ill, if you feel slightly sick, if you feel very anxious and so on, then this isn't the right sort of alignment. No way. Again, a soulmate won't make you feel like that. You're going to feel something really good and positive with a soulmate. As I say, it's a gentler connection, but that's got legs. That's got more chance of lasting. So just be wary. Just come back to your senses. Don't lose your mind completely. It's, you know, it can be a beautiful journey, but a dark journey and a dangerous journey. And all of them can be your twin flame, your karmic, your false twin flame, you know. Whatever it is that you're in. And you can get a bit lost trying to differentiate as well, because some people swear that they have very similar spiritual experiences in a false twin flame journey as well, you know. So it's very easy then to get lost in trying to define the thing and imagine, well, it must be meant to be. You know, it wouldn't be happening like this if it wasn't meant to be, and things like this. Really dangerous mindset in some instances. You know, you have to be able to hold a line to know that, yes, you can have these wild experiences in a fantasy world, in the ethereal planes, but they are not for this world. They are not necessarily something for you to try and act upon in this world at this time. And if at a later date you and they want to come together and explore the chances of any long-term connection, best to wait as well until all of this heady stuff has died down. This is very boring advice. It's not exciting advice, but it's advice that will help you keep your feet on the ground and prepare for something long term that isn't going to burn you up. Because if you were to come together with this person in any way while you've got such deep, intense, insane feelings, chances are you're just, you're going to burn each other to a frazzle in terms of it's just going to be short-lived, a lot of feeling, and then potential for so much heartbreak, so much difficulty, so much chaos lying in the wake of that. You don't want to invoke it. Sometimes you want to let the dragons rest a while, let them sleep, fall into a slumber, walk away, think about it, come back to reality. Come back to you, come back to your senses and breathe, and then look for learning experiences. Look at the ways you've held the line. Look at the ways you've remained strong. Look at the ways you've come through it with your integrity, with your sense of self, with your honor preserved, Look at the learning experiences. Look at the ways that you have seen childhood wounds triggered, but come back to loving yourself and come back to understanding a little bit more about your own wounding, about your own issues, etc. Look at the change that's happened to you since the beginning of this journey, because there's likely to be a metamorphosis happening. You don't need to get together for all of this stuff to happen, And I think in some cases, that's the point. I think just the idea that your soul and their soul have collided for a time in this ethereal planes, I think that's kind of the point, to trigger the catalyst for change and growth, self-love, coming back to the self, balancing the divine masculine and feminine forces within you, coming to a sense of self-mastery then, It isn't about the razzle-dazzle. It never was. It isn't necessarily about union either. It certainly isn't a universal class you can take on YouTube. The idea primarily is to find that within which you have been seeking or yearning without. If you can transform all of that yearning via trust in the universe, trust in yourself, a bit of healing, etc. If you can transform that into knowing that it's within you, that you have that element within you, that divine masculine within you, that you have that power within, that you don't need to seek it without. You come to a place of peace and a real sense of worthiness. No one else can steal that from you. No one else can take that from you. It's a journey. It's a journey to find that you were never really looking for it outside of yourself, ever. That you carried it within. You carry that strength within you. And that, I think, is also the point. So please do stay grounded, stay happy, come back to joy, come back to the light, come back to love. It's a journey. You won't stay in the dark places forever, even if they're very, very dark. You are going to come through it. It might not feel like it at the time, but you really, really will. It's a journey, and it will teach you how to be stronger and how to know your self-worth. Just that little bit more as well. And that's golden. These are golden teachings via a very dark path. But do not mistake this dark enchantment for a long-term future. Unless there's something very, very grounded in reality with this person. And the chances are, and the odds are, in many cases, that probably isn't going to be the case. So I hope that helps somebody today. I hope you're well. Hope you're having a good week. Take care and God bless. Bye.